The sterile hum of St. Jude's Hospital often tried to drown out the quiet anxieties of its patients, but Clara Jensen always heard them. Tonight, a new admission. A young woman clutching her blanket, whispered of fear. Clara, though exhausted, knelt by her bedside, offering a gentle, "It's okay, you're safe here," a promise she meant more than any chart could convey. As dawn bled through the hospital's high windows, painting the nurse's station in harsh fluorescent light, Clara reviewed her shift report. Numbers stared back at her. Time spent per patient, efficiency targets, metrics designed to streamline care into cold data points. Her heart ached, knowing the human moments she treasured were seen as delays. "Good morning, Jensen." The curt voice sliced through her thoughts. Brenda Steele, her supervisor, a woman whose clipboard felt like an extension of her unsmiling face, swept past, her gaze a silent judgment on anyone who dared to linger. Clara felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten. How could she give true care when every second was tallied? Later that morning, Clara found herself in room 307, the oncology wing. Mr. Arthur Henderson, a man whose medical charts were thicker than most novels, sat by the window, not reading the untouched book on his lap, but staring blankly at the cityscape. Clara performed her routine checks, her movements gentle, but her eyes saw more than vital signs. She noticed the single, wilting flower in a vase, the complete absence of photos, the profound, aching loneliness that clung to him like a shroud. He offered a polite, almost inaudible, "Thank you, nurse," when she finished, but his gaze held a quiet plea, a silent acknowledgement of the vast emptiness around him. Clara felt a familiar tug at her heart. Clara finished her routine checks in Mr. Henderson's room, neatly tucking his blanket and adjusting the IV drip. Her tasks were done, the boxes ticked, the official time allotted almost expired. She turned to leave, her hand already on the doorknob when she caught his eye. Mr. Henderson, usually so quiet, offered a small, hopeful glance, a silent plea that pulled at something deep within her. He wasn't asking for more medication or another pillow. He was asking for presence. Clara's gaze drifted to her watch, a stark reminder of the hospital's relentless schedule. Just a moment, she thought. Just a moment more. The internal conflict was swift, but compassion won. She let go of the door, stepping back into the room, a gentle warmth spreading through her chest. She reached out, her hand resting briefly on his arm, and a small, shared smile passed between them, a silent understanding that transcended any clock. That moment stretched into an hour. Clara pulled up a chair, settling in, and simply listened. Mr. Henderson, emboldened by her quiet attentiveness, began to speak. He spoke of a life lived, of adventures in far-off places, of a quiet love lost, and the simple beauty of watching the seasons change from his window. His voice, once barely a whisper, gained a gentle cadence, his expressive eyes twinkling with memories. Clara found herself utterly absorbed, forgetting the sterile beeps of the monitors outside, forgetting the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall. The world outside Mr. Henderson's room faded, replaced by the warmth of shared stories, the intimacy of genuine human connection. It was a space where metrics held no sway, where the value of an hour wasn't measured in tasks completed, but in the quiet solace exchanged between two souls. This was the true heart of nursing, Clara realized, the reason she had chosen this path. Finally, with a soft promise to return, Clara reluctantly left Mr. Henderson's room, a renewed lightness in her step. The air of quiet intimacy still clung to her, a shield against the hospital's brisk efficiency. But, as she walked down the polished corridor, a sudden chill snaked its way up her spine. In the distance, near the nurse's station, stood Brenda Steele, her supervisor. Brenda's back was turned, but as if sensing Clara's presence, she slowly pivoted. Her eyes, sharp and critical, fixed on Clara for a long, unreadable moment. There was no greeting, no smile, just that piercing, almost predatory gaze. Clara's uplifted spirit plummeted, replaced by a sudden, sickening dread. She quickened her pace, a knot forming in her stomach, the shadow of Brenda's disapproval lengthening behind her. Later that evening, the uneasy feeling solidified into cold, hard reality. Clara was unwinding in the break room, sipping lukewarm coffee, when her phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender was unmistakable. Brenda Steele. Clara's heart sank even before she opened it. The subject line, stark against the screen's glow, read, "Urgent. Meeting request. Unauthorized time allocation. Shift 17B." The bureaucratic language was a knife twist, precise and impersonal. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a summons. The system had watched, it had calculated, and now it was striking back. Clara stared at the words, her mind racing. How could she possibly defend an act of pure, unquantifiable kindness against the cold, hard data Brenda would undoubtedly wield? The harsh fluorescent lights of Brenda Steele's office seemed to amplify the sterile silence. Clara sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, facing Brenda's impassive gaze. Brenda, impeccably dressed and devoid of warmth, gestured to a spreadsheet on her monitor. "Nurse Jensen, your patient interaction logs for yesterday show a significant deviation from protocol, specifically with Mr. Arthur Henderson, room 312. Her voice was sharp, each word a precise, cold calculation. "An additional 55 minutes, unaccounted for, unapproved. This directly impacts our efficiency targets." Clara's heart sank. She tried to explain, her voice trembling slightly. Mr. Henderson was lonely, supervisor. He just needed someone to listen. It was a human need, not a medical one, but just as vital. Brenda cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Emotional support is not quantifiable, nurse. Our resources are for medical care, not extended social calls. This is about adherence to policy, not sentimentality." Clara felt a wave of frustration, her heartfelt defense crashing against a wall of rigid numbers. Clara clutched the crisp white paper in her locker room, the words, "Official written warning," a searing brand against her vision. Her hands trembled, not with cold, but with a profound sense of injustice. She saw her reflection in the chipped metal of the locker door, a defeated stranger, eyes stinging with unshed tears. How could kindness, the very essence of her calling, be deemed a transgression? Was her compassion a weakness in this cold, metrics-driven machine? The ache in her chest was a physical manifestation of her shattered idealism. She had always believed that goodness mattered, that a kind word could heal as much as any medicine, but the system had just told her, in stark, unforgiving terms, that her empathy was a liability, a waste of precious time. Later that day, Clara found herself drawn back to Mr. Henderson's room. She performed her routine checks with a quiet efficiency, her usual bright smile subdued. Mr. Henderson, ever observant, caught her eye. He didn't ask, didn't prod, but a flicker of knowing understanding passed between them. A small, gentle smile touched his lips, a silent acknowledgement of her struggle, and perhaps her sacrifice. Clara reached out, her fingers briefly touching his frail hand. In that shared, unspoken moment, a quiet promise formed in her heart. They could issue warnings, they could threaten her job, but they would never extinguish the fire of compassion within her. Not for him, not for any patient who simply needed to be seen. The cost might be high, but the human connection was priceless. The hospital corridors, once a comforting rhythm of life and care, now felt like a labyrinth under constant surveillance. For days, Clara moved through her shifts with a practiced, almost mechanical efficiency. Every interaction measured, every glance calculated. She felt Brenda Steele's eyes on her, a phantom weight on her shoulders, even when her supervisor was nowhere in sight. Sometimes, she'd catch a glimpse of Brenda's sharp silhouette at the end of a hall, a clipboard clutched like a weapon, her head tilted slightly as if listening for the faintest deviation from protocol. Clara's natural warmth, the instinct to linger a moment longer, to offer an extra word of comfort, was dulled by the cold dread of another reprimand. She moved faster, spoke less, her hands still gentle but her heart racing. It was exhausting, this constant guard, this internal battle to be both the nurse she was and the cog the system demanded. A week later, Clara found herself in Mr. Henderson's room, her movements crisp and quick, a stark contrast to her earlier, lingering visits. She took his vitals, adjusted his IV, her gaze carefully avoiding his. She could feel his quiet attention, the way his eyes followed her, but she couldn't risk another deviation. As she turned to leave, a soft, almost imperceptible sigh escaped him. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. His eyes met hers, filled with a profound understanding, a wisdom that seemed to stretch beyond his frail body. He held out a hand, pressing something cool and smooth into her palm. It was a small, polished riverstone, warm from his touch. "Thank you, Clara," he whispered, his voice thin but clear, a gentle smile gracing his lips. Clara's throat tightened. She looked at the stone, then back at him, a silent promise passing between them before she had to leave. The quiet moment with Mr. Henderson was a fleeting reprieve in a ward increasingly choked by Brenda's iron grip. At the nurse's station that evening, the air was thick with tension. Brenda, clipboard in hand, was on a disciplinary blitz. Memos were tacked to the bulletin board, detailing stricter time tracking for every patient interaction. "Efficiency is paramount," Brenda declared, her voice cutting through the hushed complaints of the other nurses. She publicly admonished Sarah, a new nurse, for spending an extra 5 minutes explaining medication to a confused elderly patient. "5 minutes, Sarah. That's 5 minutes stolen from another patient, from the hospital's bottom line." The silence that followed was oppressive, a heavy blanket of fear. Clara watched, her hands clenching at her sides, a cold fury building within her. Brenda wasn't just targeting her, she was systematically stripping the heart out of their calling. Brenda Steele's office, 2 weeks later, felt less like a place for discussion and more like a sterile interrogation room. The harsh fluorescent lights seemed to magnify every flaw, every tremble in Clara Jensen's resolve. Brenda, impassive as ever, slid another printout across the gleaming desk. "Jensen, your compassion time logs are still excessive. And now, a new concern. Patient Miller's chart indicates you spent an additional 4 minutes explaining discharge instructions, exceeding the allocated 3-minute window by 133%. Clara's stomach dropped. 4 minutes. It had been a scared elderly man, confused and alone. "He didn't understand, supervisor. I couldn't just leave him." Brenda's eyes, cold as glacial ice, fixed on her. "Compassion is a luxury, Nurse Jensen. Efficiency is a necessity. This is your final warning. Fail to conform, and your employment will be terminated. Do you understand?" Clara's throat tightened, a bitter taste filling her mouth. The words were a hammer blow, threatening to shatter her already fragile spirit. She could only nod, her vision blurring at the edges. That evening, Clara sat on her worn couch, the hospital's final warning echoing in the quiet of her small apartment. Her nursing uniform, usually a source of pride, lay crumpled on her lap, a heavy reminder of her crumbling career. Was her compassion truly a weakness in this cold, numbers-driven world? She traced the embroidered St. Jude's on the fabric, a symbol of hope that now felt like a cruel joke. Bills, unopened and intimidating, were stacked on her coffee table, mocking her dwindling prospects. How could she continue in a profession that demanded she suppress the very heart that called her to it? For the first time, a dark, heavy doubt settled deep within her, questioning not just her job, but her entire calling. Had she been foolish to believe that kindness mattered more than a clock? The next morning, driven by a need for one last moment of genuine connection, Clara sought out Mr. Henderson's room. He was weaker now, a fragile wisp against the stark white sheets, but his eyes, though heavy-lidded, still held a gentle lucidity. Clara sat by his bedside, taking his thin, papery hand in hers. She said nothing of her reprimand, her internal despair, but a silent understanding passed between them. It was a language spoken in shared glances, in the quiet strength of a touch. Mr. Henderson's thumb stroked the back of her hand, a soft, comforting gesture, and then, with a surprising strength, he squeezed her hand, a look of profound gratitude, almost knowing, etched onto his peaceful face. "Thank you, Clara," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears, for the solace he unknowingly provided. Later that same day, a hollow ache settled in Clara's chest as she walked past Mr. Henderson's room. The door was ajar, the bed stripped bare, a stark, empty space where a gentle soul had rested. A colleague, passing by with a fresh linen cart, offered a sympathetic glance. "Mr. Henderson passed peacefully this afternoon," she murmured, her voice soft. "He just faded away." Clara nodded, a pang of loss adding to the crushing weight on her heart. The quiet patient, the lonely man whose small smile had been a beacon in her darkest hours, was gone. And with him, it felt like another piece of Clara's own hope had slipped away, leaving behind an echoing emptiness. Clara moved through the oncology ward like a ghost, her movements precise, her smile a practiced curve that didn't quite reach her eyes. The vibrant spirit that once fueled her shifts was now a dim flicker, overshadowed by Brenda Steele's omnipresent scrutiny. She clocked her tasks with robotic efficiency, answered patient calls with polite brevity, and avoided any interaction that might extend beyond the allocated minute. "Just get through the day, Clara," she told herself, each breath feeling heavy. She caught Brenda's reflection in the polished chrome of a IV stand, a satisfied smirk playing on her supervisor's lips as she scribbled on a clipboard, noting Clara's newfound, joyless conformity. A week after Mr. Henderson's quiet departure, Clara found an unfamiliar, heavy envelope tucked into her small apartment mailbox. It was thick, cream-colored, and bore the embossed crest of a downtown law firm, its address radiating an aura of untouchable prestige. Norchang Time, Arthur Henderson Estate. Norchheim, the subject line read, requesting her presence for a will reading. Clara's heart thumped a confused rhythm. Why her? What could this possibly mean? The legal jargon felt alien in her hands, a stark contrast to the worn fabric of her nurse's scrubs and the quiet hum of her modest life. The next morning, the nurse's station buzzed with hushed whispers. "Did you hear about Clara?" one whispered to another, glancing nervously towards the supervisor's office. Brenda Steele, engrossed in a spreadsheet, pretended not to notice. "Some fancy lawyer sent her a letter for Mr. Henderson's will." Brenda's brow furrowed. "Henderson? That lonely old man?" She scoffed internally, dismissing it as a morbid curiosity. But then, a flicker of suspicion ignited. Clara, involved with a will from a patient? Brenda leaned imperceptibly, a calculating glint in her eye. This could be interesting. The following week, a crisp, official letter led Clara Jensen to a grand, opulent law office lobby in downtown. Marble floors stretched out, reflecting the soft glow of ornate chandeliers. Towering bookcases lined walls, filled with leather-bound tomes that smelled of old money and power. Clara, in her most sensible blouse and skirt, felt like a misplaced wildflower in a meticulously sculpted garden. Her heart hammered with a mix of awe and trepidation. What could Mr. Henderson, the quiet man who had barely spoken, possibly have to do with this world? She smoothed her skirt, feeling the scratch of the fabric against her fingertips, a stark reminder of the everyday reality she'd left behind, a world far removed from such hushed, expensive grandeur. A polite receptionist led Clara down a hushed corridor to a large conference room. As the heavy oak door swung open, Clara stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat. Already seated at the polished mahogany table, radiating an air of smug expectation, was Brenda Steele. Her supervisor, the architect of Clara's recent misery, looked up, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips, as if this opulent setting was her rightful domain. Clara's jaw dropped slightly. Why was Brenda here? The very sight of her reignited the familiar knot of anxiety in Clara's stomach. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, a man with silver hair and an impeccably tailored suit, rose to greet them. "Miss Jensen, Miss Steele," he said, his voice calm. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Brenda offered Clara a sharp, unblinking stare that spoke volumes of unspoken challenge. Mr. Davies settled back into his chair, a thick folder open before him. "We are here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Arthur Henderson." Clara watched, bewildered, as he began to speak of vast real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and charitable foundations. Arthur Henderson, the lonely patient who had stared out his window, was not just a retired schoolteacher or a quiet widower. He was a titan of industry, a shrewd investor, and a silent philanthropist who had amassed an extraordinary fortune. Brenda's smug expression slowly, incrementally, began to crack. Her eyes widened, her posture stiffened, and a faint gasp escaped her lips as Mr. Davies detailed the sheer scale of Mr. Henderson's wealth. The quiet man had held a secret no one, not even his meticulous supervisor, had ever suspected. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. Now, to the specific bequests. Mr. Henderson, being a man of profound observation and quiet generosity, made several provisions for individuals who touched his life in meaningful ways. Among these is a remarkable clause regarding the oncology wing of St. Jude's Hospital. Brenda shifted, a smug smirk still playing on her lips, but Clara felt a prickle of unease. Why was this relevant to her? Then, Mr. Davis's voice, calm and steady, cut through the silence. To Nurse Clara Jensen, for her unwavering compassion, her humanity, and her profound understanding that patient care extends far beyond medical charts and efficiency metrics, I bequeath the entire oncology wing of St. Jude's Hospital, along with an endowment of $50 million for its perpetual enhancement and operation, to be managed under her direct leadership. Clara gasped, a small, choked sound. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. $50 million? The entire wing? Brenda, however, let out a strangled cry, her face contorting, the last vestiges of her smugness shattering into pure, furious shock. The room felt suddenly charged, the air thick with the weight of an unthinkable, yet undeniable, truth. "This is preposterous!" Brenda shrieked, slamming her hand onto the polished table, the sound echoing sharply. "An outrage! She manipulated an old, sick man? This is illegal. A blatant abuse. A nurse can't just inherit an entire hospital wing. It's an insult to proper management, to policy, to everything we've built." Her voice was shrill, spittle flying. Her carefully constructed composure completely evaporated. Clara shrank back in her seat, too stunned to speak, the sheer venom of Brenda's accusation momentarily paralyzing her. Mr. Davies, however, remained utterly unperturbed. He met Brenda's furious gaze with a calm, almost pitying look. "Miss Steele," he interjected, his voice firm but quiet. "Mr. Henderson was of sound mind, and his will is legally ironclad. Furthermore, his generosity was not impulsive, but the result of meticulous observation." With a deliberate movement, Mr. Davies reached for a thick, leather-bound binder beside him. In anticipation of such strong reactions, he continued, placing the binder on the table, "Mr. Henderson also compiled a comprehensive report. It meticulously documents the impact of what he termed metrics-obsessed management on patient care and staff morale within the oncology wing." Brenda's face, still flushed with rage, visibly paled as Mr. Davies opened the binder, revealing pages filled with dates, observations, and direct quotes. He noted instances of nurses being pressured to reduce interaction times, the atmosphere of fear, and specifically the reprimands issued to Nurse Jensen for her unauthorized time allocation while simply providing comfort to a lonely patient. Clara felt a rush of silent tears, a profound sense of vindication washing over her. Mr. Henderson had seen everything. Mr. Davies closed the binder with a soft thud that sounded like a final gavel. Given Mr. Henderson's extensive influence as a major benefactor and the irrefutable evidence within this report, St. Jude's Hospital's board has already been apprised. I am instructed to inform you, Miss Steele, that your employment with the hospital is terminated, effective immediately." Brenda gasped, a ragged, broken sound. Her jaw dropped, her sputtering protests dissolving into choked cries as two silent, broad-shouldered security guards, who had seemingly materialized from nowhere, stepped forward. They politely but firmly escorted Brenda Steele from the room, her indignant wails echoing faintly down the opulent corridor before silence, heavy and absolute, returned. Clara watched her go, a mix of disbelief, shock, and a quiet, overwhelming sense of justice settling in her heart. The heavy oak door clicked shut, silencing Brenda's furious sputtering and leaving Clara alone in the opulent conference room with Mr. Davies. The air, still thick with the echoes of outrage and disbelief, now settled into a profound, almost dizzying quiet. Clara stared at the polished mahogany table, then at the thick legal documents Mr. Davies gently pushed her way. "Patlate Mayat." The entire oncology wing. A significant endowment. The words echoed in her mind, too grand, too monumental to truly comprehend. Her hands, still trembling from the confrontation, felt alien as she tried to grasp the enormity of it all. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Mr. Davies, ever composed, began to explain the terms, the legalities, the immense responsibility now laid at her feet. Clara looked around the vast, luxurious room, which had felt intimidating just an hour ago. Now it felt like a cage, or perhaps a throne, too big for a humble nurse. What was this new world she had been thrust into, and how could she possibly navigate it? Back at St. Jude's, the news ripped through the sterile corridors like a wildfire, hotter and faster than any fever. A hushed, incredulous buzz started at the nurses' station, then exploded across the hospital. Brenda Steele fired? Asterisk. Clara Jensen. She inherited the oncology wing? Whispers turned into excited murmurs, then into outright gasps of disbelief. Nurses, who had cowered under Brenda's icy gaze for years, now exchanged wide-eyed glances, a mix of shock and a thrilling, unfamiliar hope blooming in their chests. Some quietly cheered, a few even shed tears of relief for a colleague they'd seen unjustly tormented. Meanwhile, in the executive suites, phones rang off the hook. Administrators, who had blindly endorsed Brenda's metrics-obsessed regime, now scrambled, their faces pale, with a frantic mix of fear and strategic recalculation. The very foundation of their cold, efficient machine had been shaken to its core. A revolution, silent but potent, was stirring within St. Jude's, all because of one quiet nurse and one lonely patient's unseen legacy. When Clara Jensen walked back through the hospital's main entrance, it wasn't the same quiet, unassuming nurse who had left just hours ago. The automatic doors slid open, and a ripple of recognition, then a wave of applause, swept through the lobby. Doctors, nurses, even patients in wheelchairs and their visiting families, turned, stood, and clapped. Some wiped tears from their eyes, tears of vindication and shared triumph. Clara, still reeling from the day's revelations, felt a blush creep up her neck. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a symbol, a beacon of hope against the very system that had tried to crush her. Her eyes met those of her colleagues, many of whom had seen her humiliation firsthand. In their gazes, she saw not pity, but awe, respect, and a burgeoning belief that perhaps, just perhaps, kindness could truly conquer all. She offered a humble, grateful smile, her heart swelling with a new, profound sense of purpose. This wasn't just her victory. It was a victory for every kind heart, every compassionate soul, in a world that often forgot their value. Clara Jensen took a deep breath, the polished mahogany table of the hospital boardroom feeling both intimidating and empowering beneath her fingertips. This was it, her first executive meeting, not as a reprimanded nurse, but as the visionary behind the new oncology wing. Around the table, the hospital administrators, a mixture of cautious optimism and ingrained skepticism, waited. Clara stood tall, a presentation slide behind her boldly proclaiming, "Compassion first." "We are not just treating illnesses," Clara began, her voice steady despite the tremor of excitement in her chest. "We are caring for human beings. My vision for this wing introduces compassion time for our nurses. Dedicated, protected minutes to simply be with patients, listen, and offer comfort without fear of metrics or reprimand. We will implement patient comfort initiatives, holistic care programs, a return to the heart of nursing." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. One administrator, a man with a perpetually furrowed brow, cleared his throat. "Ms. Jensen, while admirable, how do we justify the additional resources? The extended patient interaction times?" Clara met his gaze, a quiet fire in her eyes. "Because Mr. Henderson's endowment ensures it. His legacy is built on the belief that kindness is the most powerful medicine, and we now have the means to prove it." The mention of the endowment settled the room, a clear reminder of the financial muscle behind her idealistic plans. It was time for St. Jude's to heal, not just bodies, but spirits. Weeks later, the oncology ward hummed with a different kind of energy. The sterile quiet was replaced by soft murmurs, gentle laughter, and the occasional strum of a guitar from a volunteer musician. Clara walked through the halls, a satisfied smile gracing her lips, observing the fruits of her compassion time pilot. Nurses, once harried and watchful, now moved with a relaxed grace, their faces open and engaged. "Clara, thank you," whispered Nurse Miller, her eyes shining as she emerged from a patient's room, a warm mug in hand. "I just spent 15 minutes listening to Mrs. Gable tell me about her garden. I don't think I've done that in years. It feels right." In another room, a young patient's mother held Clara's hand. "My son, he's actually smiling again. The nurses, they just seem to see him now. Not just his illness. It's a miracle. These were the voices that mattered, the echoes of gratitude that Brenda's spreadsheets had silenced for so long. Patient satisfaction scores soared, but more importantly, the ward felt genuinely warmer, a sanctuary of healing and human connection. Kindness, it turned out, was not just a cost, but an invaluable asset. Clara paused by the newspaper stand in the bustling hospital waiting room. Her eyes widened, a blush creeping up her neck as she saw the bold headline, "The Nurse Who Inherited Kindness, How a Compassionate Act Transformed a Hospital." Her picture, taken subtly by a local reporter during her hero's return, was plastered across the front page. She watched as a young couple, waiting anxiously for news, picked up a copy. "Did you see this?" the woman whispered, pointing to Clara's story. "That's why we came here. They say this oncology wing is different now, that they actually care." The man nodded, his expression softening. Clara felt a profound sense of humility and pride. It wasn't just about the money or the power she now wielded. It was about the ripple. Mr. Henderson's quiet generosity, her own stubborn belief in empathy, had resonated far beyond St. Jude's walls. The story of the nurse who loved too much was becoming a beacon, reminding everyone that in a world obsessed with efficiency, the human heart still held the greatest value. Months had woven themselves into a tapestry of change at St. Jude's. Clara Jensen, once a quiet nurse navigating a maze of metrics, now sat at the head of what was once Brenda Steele's austere office. The sterile, imposing space had softened under her touch. A vibrant green plant adorned the corner, and a framed photograph of a kind-eyed Mr. Henderson rested on her polished mahogany desk. Clara smiled, her gaze fixed on the glowing screen before her. The reports weren't just numbers anymore. They sang a song of progress. Patient outcomes in the oncology wing had soared. Staff satisfaction was at an all-time high, and the dreaded burnout statistic had plummeted. Leading with a full heart, she realized, wasn't just a philosophy. It was the most potent strategy of all. Every joyful face in the corridors, every grateful whisper from a patient, was a testament to a truth she had always held dear. Kindness was not a weakness, but an unstoppable force. Her eyes drifted from the screen to the small, smooth river stone on her desk, nestled beside Mr. Henderson's photo. She picked it up, its coolness a familiar comfort in her palm. It was the stone he had pressed into her hand, a silent message in the midst of her despair. At the time, she hadn't understood its full meaning, but now, holding it, a profound clarity washed over her. It symbolized the quiet strength, the unseen value of empathy. Mr. Henderson, with his profound wisdom, had known her spirit was being crushed, not by the demands of nursing, but by the cold indifference of the system. He had seen, beyond the protocols, beyond the data points, to the very heart of what truly mattered. He had given her not just a fortune, but a lasting lesson, that even the most unassuming acts of goodness held an unshakable power, and that her unique brand of compassion was a treasure the world desperately needed. A year after Mr. Henderson's extraordinary legacy had reshaped St. Jude's, the hospital lobby buzzed with a different kind of energy. The updated logo, subtly featuring a heart intertwined with a caduceus, proudly proclaimed, "St. Jude's, where compassion heals." Clara, making her rounds through the bustling entrance, observed families arriving, their faces marked not by desperation, but by a quiet hope. "We heard about your oncology wing," a woman confided, clutching her child's hand. "Everyone says it's different here, that you truly care." Another man nodded. "My sister chose St. Jude specifically because of the Clara Jensen story. She said it was the only place that felt like home." Clara offered them warm, genuine smiles, a humble pride swelling in her chest. This wasn't just a hospital anymore. It was a beacon, a living testament to the transformative power of empathy, drawing people from miles around. Later that day, Clara found herself in what was once Mr. Henderson's room, now a tranquil comfort room for patients and their families. Soft lighting, plush armchairs, and a calming waterfall feature replaced the sterile white walls. On one wall, a framed quote, chosen by Clara, read, "The smallest act of kindness is worth more than the grandest intention." She traced the words with her finger, feeling Mr. Henderson's quiet presence in the peaceful space. His generosity had not just saved a wing, it had ignited a movement. His legacy wasn't just about money. It was about the profound, lasting impact of seeing and valuing the human spirit. And in this room, in every quiet comfort offered, his echo of kindness lived on, inspiring generations to come. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows of St. Jude's oncology wing, illuminating a scene Clara Jensen once thought impossible. Nurses moved with purpose, yet their steps were light, their voices warm. There was no hurried rush, no anxious glance at a clock, just genuine connection. Clara watched as Nurse Chen sat bedside, holding an elderly patient's hand, sharing a quiet laugh. In another room, a young patient, once withdrawn, was sketching animatedly with a volunteer. The air hummed with care, not metrics. This was Mr. Henderson's legacy, brought to life by a simple act of kindness, thriving under Clara's gentle leadership. A quiet contentment settled in her heart. Later that evening, in the office that once belonged to Brenda Steele, Clara looked at her reflection in the darkened window. She saw not the anxious nurse who had been reprimanded, her dreams crumpled like a discarded chart, but a leader who had dared to believe that empathy was not a weakness, but the strongest foundation for true healing. The journey had been arduous, marked by self-doubt and despair, yet here she stood, a testament to the enduring power of a compassionate heart. A subtle, knowing smile touched her lips. She had proven that kindness wasn't just a feeling, it was a force. The story of Clara, the nurse who loved too much, spread far beyond St. Jude's walls. It became a reminder that even the smallest acts of compassion, when given freely and truly, can ripple out into monumental waves of change. It proved that, in a world obsessed with numbers, the human heart still holds the greatest value. If Clara's journey touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to The Humble Virtuoso so we can continue bringing you stories that inspire and heal. Before you leave, please comment below. Do you believe that compassion always finds its way back? Your thoughts matter, and your words may inspire someone else who needs hope today.